There we go. Okay, I am going to get judged after this call because there's one thing I am going to fail on. I like to move, and so it might be a little distracting, but I'm going to try to pick it up. I've been asked to kind of share some of the lessons learned that I have experienced and what I've incorporated. The first one, it was actually brought up if I was going to bring the greatest lesson that's out there. I have 4 children. My wife controls a lot of stuff, but I got to name our 3rd child. Our 3rd child's name is Georgia, because my favorite movie in the world, It's a Wonderful Life, and my name is Joel Daly. If it was going to be a boy, it was going to be George Bailey. So it was a girl, and it's Georgia. And if you go in that movie, if you see when the father passes away, there's a great little saying underneath there. All you can take with you is that which you give away. And if I look at probably the greatest leadership lesson that's out there, that's the one that I want everybody to remember. Matter of fact, from a background standpoint, I grew up in upstate New York, and one of my greatest mentors was my father. He's 84. Matter of fact, he's coming out next week to go skiing. And he ran a ski shop. He was on the sales side, and learned everything from him in terms of, not only being an entrepreneur, but also how to relate to people. So my ticket out was to go join the military. I actually went to the Air Force Academy, and everybody asked me if I like to fly. I can't even drive standard. The only reason I went to the Air Force Academy is I was lucky enough to get in, and there was skiing here. But it was an awesome experience. Matter of fact, one of the best leadership experiences was not only the academy, but also being in the service. I got to work on satellites. And it was just a wonderful experience, and they invested in you. And it was really, a lot of the stuff that you're gonna see in here comes from that experience. The only other thing that I would say, after I was in the Air Force, you never know what your odd jobs are. My side job was to install a video conferencing, Zoom, right? This was around 30 years ago. The only thing was, it was around $200 an hour for every connection. And only the Fortune 500 and the government could do it, but it was a great experience. And so during that experience, I then said, hey, my father asked me if I was going to run the ski shop. I was the last son to take over. I said, screw that, I want to do what you did. And I took the chance and started a video conferencing company called Link BTC. And this will kind of wrap in terms of some of the other picture that's up here. After I did that, was in the right place at the right time. I'm going to date myself, ended up selling it to Global Crossing, it was Frontier Communication and Global Crossing. Got to open up a London office. And when I was in London, I found this place called Telehouse, because real estate's very expensive, and it was a shared data center. So from there, I got into the data center business. And so the majority of my life, I ran a company called Inflow. Probably the worst mistake, I had an opportunity to sell for cash to a company called SunGard or take stock in Equinix. We took the cash. I wish I had that stock from the Equinix piece. But anyways, it was a great experience, and did that. And then after that, I had a non-compete and got into the software business. My last one, prior to where I am at right now, is called hosting. So if you drove down, anybody kind of drove down, you still see the sign that's up there. And it was a little co-location, but private hosting. And so after that, I was saying, it's time to retire. And my wife, it was her 50th birthday, and I knew Dan Caruso, the owner of Zayo, who's a great entrepreneur. I helped teach at CU with him. He gives back to the community. My wife, we're singing happy birthday. Dan Caruso is a big engineer, if anybody knows him. He's a great entrepreneur, doesn't sing happy birthday. Walks over and he starts singing happy birthday. After the happy birthday, my wife looks at him and says, Dan, get him back to work, he's driving me crazy. So if you're asking why am I an entrepreneur kind of working in a larger company, really 2 reasons. One, I don't want my wife to leave me. And the second one is I wanted to challenge myself with a larger company. All my companies were a little bit smaller. And all of them have been, all of my experiences have been ruled around this simple principle, which is really surround yourself by people smarter than you are, and you get more if you give more. And probably the most proudest thing I have my original business partner, great guy, Daly. One of our goals when we started our first business is to have 50 C-level folks that have worked for us. Matter of fact, we're gonna make Brandon Ivy stand up because I get to come in here today and I got one of them. Brandon Ivy, the founder, co-founder of Evoke Technologies, I had the pleasure of working with. And that is one of the things that just makes me fired up and excited. I don't have to stress, I'm going to talk about leadership lessons, but if you look at what's happening in today's day and age, leadership is more important than ever. We think, yeah, the robots and the technology are going to take over the world, but probably the most important thing is the leadership that's out there. I can't tell you, when I started my first company to currently, the amount of information, the speed that competitors will come after you. Look at, what is it, DeepSeek? Everybody's like, holy cow, wait a second, we had the big lead. And all of a sudden it changes. And that speed of change requires great leadership for many different reasons. So I'm going to share a few of those with you. And even though you might not be the CEO or the top dog within your company, it's very important in terms of rule number one. The health of your organization trumps everything. And so even though you might be a CIO, a director of IT, running a division, it is your leadership responsibility to make sure that the organization is aligned. It's probably the biggest thing. You have to come together from a top standpoint and make sure that you have a defined strategy. Organization clarity is also very important. When you're starting to build teams and you're starting to create organizations, making sure that there are clear goals, roles and responsibilities that are out there are absolutely critical. The other biggest thing, and it's fascinating because I ran companies that were smaller, now I'm with a very big company, and this is my new challenge, the importance of making a decision and communications. As a leader, it is your responsibility to make a call. Or not make a call, but state that you're not going to make a call. And the last one is the other successful rule that I've had is create structure where there's no structure. You want to have a framework in which basically operating norms that are out there and processes that are out there that help align the organization and lead your teams. Rule number two, and I'm gonna spend a little bit more time, but I'm gonna go through quickly this one, but it's probably one of the most important ones that are out there, is investing time in hiring and training. I think, where was it, Doug said the first rule, HR teaches us how to fire. I can't tell you the importance. It all comes down to people and having a process and a logic, not only on hiring, but the one I'm very passionate about, and I love this organization, because the mentoring and we're trying to build leadership is the training side. My Air Force career was probably one of the best ones that are out there because they trained the hell out of me. You know what happens right now? I got 4 kids, 3 of them got jobs, thank God. One in college and he's gonna graduate. It's hard to find a job. Guess what the big thing now is? I need 5 years of experience. I need 5 years of experience. Well, what about these poor people that are just starting out? Matter of fact, one of my new things that I do on Fridays as one of my operating norms is try to find new grads jobs. And I don't really even find jobs for them. What I really do is teach them about networking. I've got an old boss, Colonel Mark Hughes. And Colonel Hughes, when I was in the Air Force working for him, I was going to go start my business. He went through a career plan template with me. I had to pick 3 of the top jobs. And basically I wanted to run my own business. I wanted to be Secretary of State and I wanted to be a dean. And you know what he did? He basically said, okay, Joel, you have your father that ran a business, but I'm going to introduce you to somebody in the State Department. And he also lined me up with the dean. And that's all I do. I find out what these kids want to do, and to get them networking, I will make an introduction. So there's a framework that's out there that we can all do. The next one that's, when we get into our jobs as leaders, sometimes we get very focused. I know this is an IT organization that's out there. You have to collaborate with many different departments. However, what happens as you grow and you get bigger? probably the worst, one of the biggest challenges I have right now, and I have to force myself to think about new ways of getting in front of the customer. It is so typical that you can kind of get so focused internally on your job that you don't relate back to the customer. So there's two things that I do. I'm in a very large organization. I'm a deal hunter and I love to sell, so I get involved in many of the big deals. I'm buddies with our CRO, and if there's a hairy deal that's out there, it allows me to communicate and really understand the customer. The other thing, because I'm responsible for the strategy, all the 5-year planning, I said, okay, we're not going to get internal. We have the greatest customers in the world. Once a month, I have a customer come and talk to the executive team. So we get all the hyperscalers and everything else. It's called the outside-in perspective. Once again, a little technique that you can do or think about within your position to get you closer to the customer, because that's probably the most important thing that's out there. The other thing, from a leadership standpoint, and this is probably the hardest one, we can track every metric in the world now. Matter of fact, there is a good friend of mine, Chris Wheeler, I think his saying was, do we measure what is important, or do we make important what we can measure? And I always love that one, because we've got so much data that's out there. And as a leader, we've got to work with our teams to hone in on the simplicity, the drivers that are out there, because you can get totally overwhelmed. The other hardest thing in the world, from a leadership perspective, is that we don't have enough time in the day to do all the work that we have to do. Having a framework on prioritization and thinking about how we're going to focus is one of the key leadership principles that we all have to live by, and having a plan for that. So I'm all big in terms of radical transparency, but also radical prioritization. So a couple of things I'm going to leave you here today is some frameworks to think about. Being in a larger company now, we get to spend consulting dollars. I don't like the value of that consulting dollars. I want to throw up sometimes because it's too much money. But I got to work with the McKinseys, the Bains, and everybody else. And so there was some advantages and some lessons learned that I picked up, because remember I said, one of the only things I've done in terms of being an entrepreneur is putting a little structure where there's no structure. And as a leader, I think I love to go to frameworks that work. Matter of fact, when I think about prioritization, and I'm responsible for the 5-year plan, it's pretty, and you've got AI going on and all these other crazy things, data centers are going up left and right. I had to put together a framework in terms of how we were going to map out our 5-year strategy. There's a whole boatload of them out there, but there's one called Playing to Win, or The Right to Win. Playing to Win was, the original folks was Martin Robert, and A.G. Daly. He was the CEO of Procter & Gamble. And I love this framework because, believe it or not, it forces prioritization. And if you look at the framework, very simple. Everybody wants to set a vision. What is your aspiration? Whether it's your company, whether it's your department, no matter what it is. The two next elements is the prioritization tactics that are out there. Truly defining where are you going to play and how are you going to win. Those are the two most important things. Because the easiest thing in the world is to go after everything. I want to do this, I want to do that. Matter of fact, when I was in the Air Force, I got to go to the Southern California Entrepreneur Academy. You had to go for 1 year, and you went to real businesses every Saturday, and you couldn't miss it or you got kicked out. And this is Quicksilver and all these other, I'm dating myself because I'm old, hopefully Quicksilver's still around. But one of the big themes that I got out of there was, hey, there's a natural human tendency to want to do more because you want to compete, you want to be different. I want to go do this, I want to go do that, so I can say I'm doing something different than my competition. 9 times out of 10, you fail. And you got to really say, what are you going to focus on? Because if you have focus, you can then have a clear definition of how you're going to win. And yes, you got to improve, and yes, you have to involve, but they're absolutely critical in terms of thinking about the prioritization process. The last one that I absolutely love, we'd come up with all these strategy plans, you have these strategy sessions and everything else, and I even did it in my own companies, and you come up with 900 capability or 900 things that you want to do. And then you get into the next year, and guess what you didn't do? You didn't budget for it. You don't have people for it. You don't have time for it. So the biggest thing, and the nicest thing we actually, is a big implementation at Zayo, is what capabilities do, when you put together a strategy plan, what capabilities need to be in place? And you have to make sure that you have people, process, and systems to support that capability. Otherwise, it's very difficult to achieve that strategy or that framework. So this is just a little tool to think about from a leadership perspective. The last one I'll leave you, and it even plays into that framework, is we get so tied up to the day-to-day firefighting. We got this problem, we got that problem. I'm in charge of government funding. I raised around $300 million in terms of bringing broadband to everywhere. It's a great mission that Zayo's doing. I went to the leadership and said, let's go do this. And oh, by the way, we do these long haul routes and never do exit ramps to these rural communities. And instead of getting an anchor like a hyperscaler, we're getting the government plus the hyperscalers to do these very long haul dark fiber routes that are out there. It's an awesome thing. And when you think about it in terms of distractions, guess what happened on Monday? Or was it Monday or Tuesday? Trump comes up and stops all the payment. Board calls, Joel, what are you gonna do? And so you gotta go scramble and everything else. And you could so easily get wrapped up with all the tactical stuff that's out there. The biggest takeaway, and I'm gonna distribute this because I'm not gonna walk through all the steps here. The number one thing is you gotta allocate time to think strategically. You have to book like Friday mornings or Friday afternoons where you can get so tied up with all our messaging, all of our email, and if you just kind of allocate, whether it's once a week, every 2 weeks, I highly encourage that discipline in terms of being able to handle both the strategic and the tactical questions that are out there. You got to do both as a leader, but the biggest message that I would send back to you is allocating time for that strategic thinking. How am I doing on time? Okay, so those were probably the largest takeaways. I do actually love my job. People are like, hey, you're an entrepreneur. Why the hell are you I kind of told you the reasons why I'm in a larger company. The most interesting thing is you get to deal with the largest companies in the world. And what's happening in terms of the AI side and everything else is a wonderful opportunity that's in front of us. Matter of fact, the interesting thing that I had to do is put together our 5-year model and planning. And so you got heavy investment, right? You talk about the deep sea stuff that happened. And so we have seen our fiber counts just go through the roof in the last 18 months. And it's all from the largest customers that are out there, driven by the AI demand. Matter of fact, we've got some data center folks here. We know what's happening on the data center side. And it all kind of comes down to the power side. And you've got these huge power demands that are out there. It's just exciting times. But with these exciting times and so many opportunities, you gotta focus. You gotta put together a framework to kind of think about how you're going to attack the opportunities that are out there. So these were some of the top. I've got a few more underneath my sleeve, but I wanted to kind of leave you with some tools and some techniques as you think about your leadership practices and skills that are out there. And I love, John, your speech. I got a few. I know that I moved a little bit too much today, but loved it. Any questions?